When a narcissist realizes that you have won, it does not happen in a moment of dramatic confrontation. It happens in the quiet. It happens in that single breath when they look at you and understand that the power they once held, the sway they once enjoyed, has slipped out of their hands. They see it in your eyes first. Not anger, not fear, not exhaustion, but clarity. And that clarity is something they cannot control. You see, a narcissist survives on the belief that you will always come back, embarrass, that you will always explain yourself, that you will always defend, justify, negotiate, and shrink your needs to fit their comfort. But life has a remarkable way of teaching us when it is time to rise, when it is time to reclaim the dignity that has been waiting patiently inside us. And when you finally do, when you choose peace over chaos, something inside them shakes. They begin to question themselves in ways they never imagined. Embarrassed, they replay old conversations and wonder why their usual tricks no longer work. They offer half smiles, half apologies, half truths, hoping you will step back into the role they created for you. But you do not this time. Because this time, you have discovered something they never wanted you to see. You have discovered your worth. What happens next is almost predictable. They try harder. They become louder or softer, colder or warmer, anything to pull you back into their orbit. But your silence speaks louder than their performance. Your calm becomes their storm. And the moment they realize that, truly realize it, they feel the weight of a loss they never thought could happen. Because in their mind, they were the sun and you were expected to revolve around them, but you chose a different path. You chose to build your own light. And there is nothing more threatening to a narcissist than someone who no longer needs their approval to shine. You step forward with a sense of self that does not bend. Your voice becomes steady. Your decisions become firm. And your heart, the one they once drained with constant doubt, becomes strong again. You grow. You heal. And that healing becomes the undeniable proof that you have won. They try to pretend they do not care, but beneath that mask, there is panic, there is confusion, there is the sinking realization that the game they played for so long has ended. And it ended not with them breaking you, but with you outgrowing them. That is the moment you reclaim your story. That is the moment you rise above the noise. And that is the moment they understand the truth they were never prepared to face. You did not just walk away, you walked forward. And that is the victory that echoes long after they are gone. When a narcissist senses that they no longer control your emotions, it does not arrive like a lightning bolt. It starts quietly, almost invisibly, like the shifting of the tide long before the waves hit the shore. There is a moment, often so simple it could be missed, when they look at you and realize something has changed. And the striking part is that you do not have to raise your voice or defend yourself or announce that you are done. The transformation happens through your energy. The energy you once gave so freely, the reactions you once offered so quickly, the explanations you once felt obligated to produce, they are no longer there. You no longer feed the dynamic that once drained you. And that silence, that calm, that emotional distance, it sends a message far louder than anger ever could. Imagine the years or months before that moment. You walked on eggshells, choosing words carefully, hoping not to spark another argument or another guilt trip. You responded to everything they said, even when you knew it was twisted or unfair, because you believed that if you could just explain the truth clearly enough, they would finally understand you. You carried their moods on your shoulders. You absorbed their criticism like it was oxygen. You tried harder, gave more, stretched yourself thin to keep the peace. And even then, they kept demanding more. More attention, more apologies, more sacrifice. They treated your empathy as if it were endless, and for a long time, you believed it was. But growth has a way of sneaking up on you. It starts the moment you begin to question the cycle. The moment you feel tired, not physically, but emotionally tired in a way that sits deep in your bones. You begin to notice how they twist every disagreement into an attack against themselves, how they refuse to take accountability, yet expect you to carry both your burdens and theirs, how they praise you when you are useful and dismiss you when you express a boundary. And with every observation, you gain a little more clarity. Clarity is the first step toward freedom. It is the first time you see the manipulation for what it is rather than for what they told you it meant. The narcissist senses this shift long before they fully understand it. They notice your patience thinning, your eyes not softening as easily, your voice not trembling to please them. A narcissist is more perceptive than people assume. They monitor reactions the way a hunter studies movements. They have built their entire identity around being the center of someone else's emotional universe. So when that emotional connection weakens, when they feel the slightest drop in the control they once enjoyed, they react. At first, they test you with something subtle, maybe a comment designed to provoke insecurity or guilt. They expect the familiar response as the explanation, the defense, the conversation that dissolves into exhaustion. But when that moment comes and you do not react the way you used to, something shifts inside them. They feel it as a threat. Your calm unsettles them. Your silence challenges them. Your confidence, however small it might still be, feels like resistance. Because a narcissist does not fear losing the relationship. They fear losing relevance. They fear losing the emotional leash they used to tug on whenever they wanted attention. And the moment you stop reacting, you cut that leash without making a sound. They begin to observe you differently. They try to provoke a reaction. Embarrassed, they bring up old mistakes, create new accusations, or pretend to be the wounded one. They exaggerate their distress or minimize yours, all in an effort to pull you back into the cycle. But while you once spiraled with them, you now remain steady, not detached in a cold or cruel way, but grounded in your growing sense of self. You stop explaining your worth. You stop defending your intentions. You stop offering pieces of yourself just to keep the peace. You listen without absorbing. You speak without shrinking. You exist without asking for permission. And that is when they truly feel it. That is when they sense the loss. It is not when you shout or argue. It is not when you try to leave in anger. It is when you no longer fear their disappointment. It is when you no longer need their approval. It is when you look at them and see not someone who defines your life, but someone who once distracted you from it. There is a strange beauty in that moment. It is the moment your heart finally catches up to what your mind has known for a long time. It is the moment you stop trying to heal someone who never intended to heal. It is the moment you realize you deserve peace. Even if someone else refuses to offer it, they sense that freedom rising inside you. They feel it even if they cannot name it. And for the first time, the balance shifts. They cannot reach into your emotions and twist them anymore. They cannot weaponize your kindness or your vulnerability. They cannot predict your reactions because you are no longer reacting. You are responding. You are choosing. You are thinking for yourself instead of feeling for both of you. And when they realize that the control is gone, not slipping, but gone, that is when they understand that the version of you they once manipulated will never return. It is not anger that defeats them. It is not revenge. It is your evolution. It is the quiet rise of someone who finally sees their own value. Someone who refuses to live on emotional scraps. Someone who has learned how to stand in their own truth without flinching. When silence replaces your reactions, something profound begins to unfold, both inside you and inside the narcissist who once thrived on your emotional responses. They have spent so much time learning how to push your buttons, how to draw energy from your frustration, your explanations, even your attempts to stay calm. They expected you to answer every accusation, soothe every mood, correct every misunderstanding they created. You were trained to react. You were conditioned to explain yourself even when you had done nothing wrong. And each time you reacted, they felt reassured that they still mattered more in your world than you mattered in your own. But then one day, the noise inside you quiets, the storm settles, the exhaustion becomes too heavy to ignore. You no longer feel the need to respond to every provocation, embarrass. Your spirit reaches a point where peace becomes more important than proving anything. That is when the silence begins, and that silence becomes the turning point. At first, your silence does not come from power. It comes from being tired, worn down, drained to the point where explaining yourself no longer feels like a path to resolution, but a ritual of futility. There is nothing left in you to argue with. You sense the old patterns rising, the familiar accusations forming. But instead of engaging, you let them fall, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. You understand what you could not see before. Every reaction you offered in the past was fuel. Every defense you gave was reinforcement, arrows. Every emotional rise was a reminder to them that they still had access to your inner world. When you stop reacting, that door closes. And the moment it closes, the narcissist feels it before you even realize the magnitude of what you have done. Eris. Confusion is the first emotion that hits them. It is almost visible in the tilt of their head, in the shift of their tones, in the way their eyes scan your face, searching for the old version of you. They do not understand how to navigate a world where you are no longer predictable. They speak words that once cut you deeply, expecting them to land with the same force. But they do not. They throw accusations like darts, but they fall at your feet instead of piercing your heart. They wait for explanations, but none come. They look for the spark of fear, guilt, or desperation in your expression, but they find calmness where chaos used to live. This calmness unsettles them in a way nothing else ever has. A narcissist has always relied on emotional chaos because chaos keeps you distracted, unbalanced, easier to control. When you do not react, they lose that anchor. They lose the map they used to navigate your emotions. They lose the ability to pull you back into old arguments that kept you tied to their narrative. Silence strips them of their favorite weapon, the one they depended on more than any insult or manipulation tactics. They cannot twist your words if you are not speaking. They cannot distort your feelings if you are not displaying them. They cannot drain your energy if you are no longer offering it. You may not realize it at first, but this silence is not passive. Embarrass. It is not weak. It is powerful, intentional, and deeply transformative. It reflects the shift inside you. It reflects the moment you choose peace over chaos, self-respect over compliance, clarity over confusion. And the more you embrace that silence, the stronger you feel. It is not the silence of resignation. It is the silence of liberation. The silence of someone who has finally recognized the game and decided not to play it anymore. The narcissist, however, embarrassed, experiences that silence as an alarm. They begin to poke harder. They escalate. They raise their voice, or they become strangely sweet, or they switch between pity and rage, all in an attempt to retrieve the reactions you are no longer giving them. They throw emotional bait, hoping one will hook you. They try to guilt you with phrases they used successfully in the past. They attempt to provoke jealousy or fear. They reshape their stories to appear like the victim, embarrass, hoping your empathy will reopen the doors they sense are closing, but you remain centered, steady, unmoved. This time, their performance does not stir the storm inside you. You are observing instead of participating. You are listening instead of absorbing. You are watching patterns instead of falling into them. And each time you do not react, You reclaim a part of yourself you thought was gone. You reclaim your dignity. You reclaim your emotional independence. You reclaim the ability to choose who deserves your energy and who does not. Your silence becomes your new language. It says everything you could never express in arguments. It speaks of self-worth. It speaks of strength. It speaks of the decision to no longer negotiate your value with someone who feeds on your insecurities. It speaks of the inner growth they cannot unsee, no matter how hard they pretend, embarrass. It is in this silence that they finally understand they are losing their grip. Not because you shouted, not because you fought back, but because you found a version of yourself that does not need their validation. You found stability within yourself instead of seeking it from their unpredictable approval. You found peace that they can no longer disturb. That realization shakes them. Because the moment silence replaces your reactions, embarrass, the power they once had dissolves. And in that dissolution, they see the one truth they never wanted to face. Embarrass, you have begun to outgrow them. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than someone who no longer dances to their emotional rhythm. When you stop defending yourself, something monumental begins to shift in the dynamic with a narcissist. It is not an obvious shift at first. It begins subtly, almost quietly, like a room changing temperature before anyone notices. You have spent so long explaining yourself that defending your intentions felt automatic. You defended your tone, your decisions, your character, your heart. You defended things that should have never required defense in the first place. You defended against accusations that had no grounding in truth. You defended to keep peace, to avoid conflict, to show your loyalty, to prove you cared. But the moment arrives when you recognize that every defense you give is not creating understanding. It is feeding a cycle that was never designed to end. You reach a point where your spirit becomes tired of being misinterpreted. It becomes tired of carrying blame that does not belong to you. It becomes tired of fighting battles that were always set up for you to lose. And when you step back from that habit, when your mind becomes clear enough to see that defending yourself to a narcissist is like pouring water into a bottomless pit, something powerful awakens within you. You realize your explanations were never the issue. The issue was that they were never listening. They were waiting to twist your words, waiting to deflect, waiting to turn every moment into proof that you were the problem. And the second you stop playing that role, the entire balance shifts. The narcissist does not know how to operate without your defensive energy. They relied on it. Embarrass. It was the lifeline that kept the dynamic alive. When you defended yourself, you gave them access to your emotions, your insecurities, your desire to be understood. But when you stop defending, when you instead stand in your truth without bending, they feel the foundation beneath them begin to tremble. They are used to debates that never end. They are used to you plating your intentions. They are used to twisting the story until you question yourself. And for the first time, you may no longer participating. You may not even announce it. You may simply stop offering explanations. You state your boundaries. You speak your truth clearly. And instead of following it with long, elaborate justifications, you let your word stand. That quiet confidence confuses them because they built their entire control strategy around the idea that you would always try to prove yourself. Embarrass. When you stop trying, they lose one of their strongest tools. They attempt to provoke you immediately. They accuse you of being cold, distant, selfish, ungrateful. They resort to old tactics that used to work flawlessly. They try guilt. They try anger. They try victimhood. Every reaction you once gave them created a pathway back into your emotions. But now that you are grounded in your clarity, those same tactics feel hollow. You see the pattern instead of absorbing the attack. You hear the manipulation instead of believing the narrative. And your strength grows with every moment You choose not to defend. There is a calm that comes from knowing you are no longer controlled by someone else's version of you. You begin to understand that defending yourself was not an act of self-respect. It was an act of survival. It was an attempt to hold onto someone who was never holding onto you in the first place. And when you finally step out of that cycle, your voice becomes steadier. Your thoughts become clearer. Your heart becomes lighter. You are no longer carrying the weight of their accusations. You are no longer spending emotional energy trying to make someone see you honestly who has no intention of doing so. A narcissist sees your withdrawal from defense as a threat, not because they want to understand you, but because they want to control the narrative. When you stop defending, you take the narrative out of their hands. You no longer allow them to dictate who you are. They sense the shift in your posture, in your voice, in your presence. They feel the distance growing between what they claim you are and what you know you are. And that gap terrifies them, Chris. They may try harder. They may try to corner you into arguments. They may throw outrageous accusations just to trigger a response. But the more they push, the more you see how predictable the pattern is. You respond with a simple truth instead of a long explanation. You remain calm instead of emotional. You walk away instead of engaging. And each time you choose peace over the need to be understood, you gain power they never expected you to hold. Soon, something remarkable happens. You start to recognize your own worth, not through their approval, but through your own stability. You realize that people who truly care about you do not force you into endless self-defense. They listen. They try to understand, embarrass. They take accountability. They meet you halfway. And once you understand that, you can no longer accept the chaos you once normalized. Your transformation becomes undeniable. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to love the quiet you once feared. You begin to see how much strength was inside you all along, hidden beneath layers of emotional exhaustion. The narcissist sees it too. And that is the moment they understand they cannot pull you back into the cycle. They realize that you have found something they cannot manipulate. You have found inner clarity. You have found emotional independence. You have found yourself. And once you find yourself, you stop defending who you are. You start becoming who you were always meant to be. When your growth becomes their greatest fear, it does not happen because you shouted or fought harder, embarrassed. It happens because you changed in ways they never believed you could. Growth is quiet at first. It begins in moments where you start questioning your own patterns, your own choices, your own tolerance. You begin to see how much of yourself you gave away in the name of love, loyalty, or hope. And that realization sparks something inside you, something small but stubborn, a seed that slowly pushes upward toward the light. You may not even recognize the transformation happening within you, but the narcissist does. They feel it before you do, because your growth threatens the version of you they built their power around. Your growth starts when you begin valuing your peace more than the chaos they bring. When you stop needing their validation to feel worthy. When you stop shrinking yourself to avoid conflict, embarrass. You start noticing the emotional distance between who you are becoming and who you were when they met you. The difference is subtle but unmistakable. You communicate with more clarity. You breathe differently. You pause before reacting. You observe before engaging. You choose moments intentionally instead of impulsively. And whether you know it or not, these changes shake the foundation of the narcissist's control. They are not afraid of you becoming stronger in some dramatic, outward way. They are afraid of your growth in the quiet, internal ways that break their influence over you. They fear the day you no longer crave their approval. They fear the moment you begin to trust your own voice. They fear the possibility that you will wake up and realize that the love you were offering was far greater than the love you were receiving. Because once you see that truth clearly, the dynamic can never remain the same. A narcissist thrives when you doubt yourself. They thrive when you question your value. They thrive when you rely on them for emotional stability, identity, or belonging. Growth cuts those ties. Growth gives you a new lens. You look at situations differently. You start asking yourself why you tolerate behaviors that drain your spirit. You start evaluating what you genuinely deserve. You start realizing that love is not supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. Respect is not supposed to be conditional. Support is not supposed to vanish when you need it most. And the moment that clarity settles in your heart, the narcissist senses danger. Your growth exposes their weakness. It highlights their immaturity. It reveals their inability to meet you where you are rising. They cannot follow you into the space you are stepping into because that space requires accountability, empathy, honesty, and humility. And those are qualities they do not cultivate. Those qualities threaten their ego, so they avoid them at all costs. This is why your evolution rattles them. Your growth shines a light on the parts of themselves they do not want to face. And instead of rising with you, they try to pull you back down. You will notice it in the way they suddenly criticize the improvements you are making, Chris. They belittle your new confidence or dismiss your new boundaries. They claim you have changed in negative ways, even though your growth is the healthiest thing you have ever done. They try to guilt you by saying you are becoming distant or selfish or dramatic. They attempt to stir insecurity by portraying themselves as the victim of your transformation. But the truth is simple. They are not afraid of losing you. They are afraid of losing control over you, Aris. There is something deeply powerful that happens when you realize their fear is not your responsibility. You begin to break emotional patterns that once kept you stuck. You begin to outgrow the version of yourself that relied on their approval. You begin to love yourself in a way that feels unfamiliar at first, but liberating with each passing day. You realize that your growth is not an attack on them, despite how they interpret it. Your growth is a return to yourself. You start choosing people who support your evolution instead of fearing it. You start surrounding yourself with energy that nurtures your soul instead of draining it. You start believing that you deserve love that does not demand self-abandonment. And as you rise, you begin to feel lighter. You begin to watch pieces of the old you fall away, the pieces that tolerated disrespect, the pieces that overgave, the pieces that apologized just to keep the peace, the pieces that dimmed their light to avoid conflict. All of those pieces serve their purpose, but you no longer need them. The narcissist sees this transformation and panics because they know they cannot go where you are going. They try to pull you backward with memories, with guilt, with familiar patterns. They attempt to confuse you with sudden affection or sudden hostility. They shift tactics, hoping to stop your evolution before it becomes irreversible. But this time, you see their behavior for what it is. Not love, not concern, fear. Fear that you will reach a place where their presence no longer influences your identity. And then it happens. You reach a point where your growth becomes stronger than their fear. You stand tall in who you are becoming. You move forward without needing their permission. You start honoring your boundaries with confidence instead of apology. Your emotional world begins to align with the truth you always carried inside, the truth that says you deserve peace, respect, love, and stability. And your growth becomes the moment everything changes. Because once you outgrow the environment that once trapped you, you can never fit back into it again. You rise, you evolve, you walk forward. And whether they admit it or not, they know they have lost the version of you they could control. They know they have lost access to your self-doubt. They know your growth has become their greatest fear, because it is the one thing they cannot manipulate, stop, or reverse. When you reach the end of this journey, when you look back at everything you survived, everything you learned, and everything you reclaimed, you understand something extraordinary. You were never weak. You were never naive. You were never broken beyond repair. You were simply growing through an environment that was designed to shrink you. And yet you rose anyway. That rise, that undeniable rise, becomes the final truth that no one can take from you. There is a moment in every story where the person who was underestimated becomes the person who defines the path forward. Loud. It is steady. It is grounded. It is born from scars that turn into wisdom and wounds that turned into strength. Your story carries that moment now. Your transformation is not quiet anymore. It carries a presence, a weight, a voice. And that voice speaks a truth that will echo far beyond the chapter you just closed. Embarrass. You have learned that peace is more powerful than chaos. You have learned that silence is not surrender. It is strategy. It is dignity. It is self-control. You have learned that walking away is not weakness. It is choosing yourself. It is choosing your healing. It is choosing a future where you are not begging to be seen, but standing in a place where you already know your value. You have learned that your heart is not fragile. It is resilience. You have learned that your spirit is not dependent on someone else's approval. It is fueled by your own growth, Eris. And now you stand here not defined by what happened to you, but defined by who you chose to become. You chose strength over fear, embarrass. You chose clarity over confusion. You chose freedom over familiarity. You chose a life where your worth is not up for negotiations. There will come a day when the narcissist who tried to break you will remember the version of you who carried their burdens and question how they ever believed they could diminish someone built to rise. But that is not your concern. Your story is no longer about proving anything to anyone. Your story is about stepping fully into the person you are becoming. You are not the same. You are wiser. You are calmer. You are stronger. Strength is not loud. Strength is standing tall in a world that once tried to make you small. Strength is telling your truth even when your voice shakes. Strength is choosing a future that honors your worth. There is a line that life teaches all of us. The most powerful moment in your life is the moment you finally decide that your peace matters more than their chaos. That decision changes everything. That decision rewrites your story. That decision is the point where you stop surviving and start living. You have reached that moment. You have crossed that threshold. You have lifted yourself out of the shadows of someone who needed you broken just to feel powerful. And now you rise as someone who no longer needs their validation because you have discovered your own. And hear this clearly. You did not win because you hurt them. You won because you healed yourself. You won because you reclaimed your power. You won because you refused to let someone else define your value. You won because you refused to stay in a place where your voice was silenced. You won because you became someone they can no longer manipulate, control, or intimidate. You won because you finally believed that you deserve more. Let these words stay with you. Let them remind you who you have become. You are the storm they never saw coming. You are the calm they could not disturb. You are the strength they could not break. You are the lesson they never wanted to learn. You are the victory they never expected to witness. And you are the freedom they never believed you would find. You are living proof that healing is stronger than manipulations. Growth is stronger than control. Self-respect is stronger than fear. And truth is stronger than every lie they used to hold power over you. Your story does not end with their chaos. Your story begins with your rise. So move forward with a heart that is steady, a mind that is clear, and a spirit that refuses to shrink for anyone. Move forward knowing that you have become someone unshakable. someone grounded, someone powerful, someone who survived the very thing that was meant to break them. And remember this, not as a line, but as a promise to yourself. The moment you choose your worth, the world begins to change around you. The moment you protect your peace, your life begins to expand. The moment you walk away from what hurt you, you walk toward what was always meant for you. Stand tall, walk forward. And never again forget this truth. You did not just escape the darkness. You became the light that outgrew it.